And thanks for reporting on these important issues. So I just want to start with a message around drought and our fireworks. This week, we are reporting that 98% of Utah is either in extreme or exceptional drought. That number continues to climb. Those are, of course, the two highest drought levels. Our reservoirs now are at about, on average, 58% of normal, down from 59% last week. As Brian Steed, the director of the Department of Natural Resources, mentioned, we are completely done with any runoff, and now we're relying on basically our emergency storage across the state. So 26 of Utah's largest 42 reservoirs remain below 55% of available capacity. As a result, our key messages remain the same as they have been since we declared the statewide emergency in March. Only water your landscaping twice per week in northern Utah and 3 times per week in southern Utah. That's what we're doing at state facilities, and we thank those individuals and businesses who are doing the same. We encourage everyone to conserve wherever they can, fix those leaky faucets and sprinklers. Remember to prioritize your trees over your lawns. We want to keep those trees alive, and only water in the early morning or evening. All of these measures by individuals and businesses can make a difference. There is some good news on the horizon. The long-term forecast over the next 6 to 10 days and 10 to 18 days are showing the likelihood of above average precipitation as that monsoonal moisture carries north. So fingers crossed. We know St. George, Washington County and Iron County got hit hard yesterday. That's good news. Those aren't drought busters. We need storms like that every day for a few weeks to get out of this drought, but every little bit certainly helps. Now, I do want to repeat one oft repeated request, and that is that as we come towards Pioneer Day, that people again forego using personal fireworks, and I want to take this opportunity to thank people. It's actually making a difference. It's rare that we can point and say you made a difference this year, but here we have the data to back it up. So last week, there were 35 total wildfires compared to 63 during the same week in 2020. So we're almost half of the number of wildfires that we had the year before. Now, 24 of those were human-caused compared with 61 last year. So to go from 61 human-caused wildfires to 24 shows that people are actually listening and they're taking the measures that we need them to take. So the week of July 4th also saw a similar change, fewer wildfires, almost half as many human-caused wildfires compared to the same week last year. Firefighters have responded to 561 wildfires so far this year, and over 80% of those have been human starts. So we applaud and appreciate Utahns who are recreating safely, and we just have to keep this up as we go through this again very, very dangerous and dry time in our state. July through September are traditionally our most challenging months, and so we certainly have work to do. I've talked to many of our local firefighters who are just so grateful for the work of Utahns. They've been able to get ahead of fires. They haven't been as stretched thin as we expected because of the conditions, and so we're trending in a positive direction. But that's only because people are vigilant and have made actual changes in their behaviors. So thank you for that. Now, I just want to talk about our COVID situation a little bit. We 2 weeks ago, I had shared that I hear from people whose loved ones are dying from COVID, are being hospitalized from COVID, and how disappointing that has been for them, and how sad we are for those families who are unnecessarily facing those hospitalizations and deaths. Our number of COVID cases continue to rise. Our hospitalizations had risen, they dipped back down, they're climbing again right now, and so we're always worried about the hospitalization side of things, and of course, when you have more cases and you have more hospitalizations, eventually you have more fatalities as well, and we're reporting those fatalities. We'll likely have another large case number today. It won't surprise me to see that Thursdays are always our worst days. They have been throughout the pandemic, and so we expect to see large numbers again as those continue to climb. But also again, again, people who are vaccinated, we are having breakthrough cases, but they're rare. Again, in 90 to 95%, 96% breakthrough cases, and hospitalizations and fatalities are all amongst unvaccinated people. So we say it again and again. There is a little bit of positive news there as well, and that is that we have seen vaccination rates start to climb again. Not huge leaps, but they are coming. They are moving in a positive direction, and so if you have been putting it off for whatever reason, as young people who are eligible for the vaccine are getting ready to go back to school, now is a great time to get them vaccinated so that they can be fully vaccinated when school starts next month. But as I mentioned, now we do have some public stories of people who are speaking out, who were unvaccinated, who have contracted COVID and had really terrible outcomes. We've had people, you can see these stories, some of you have written these stories, and there was a story from a prominent radio personality, Hans Olsen, a good friend of his, that he shared. He spent time in the ICU with a dear friend who was unvaccinated and got COVID. I know Lisa Riley Roach wrote a story yesterday or the day before about a triathlete who regrets not getting vaccinated because he nearly died after contracting COVID. There was also a story from the Tri-County Health Department of a nurse in the Uinta Basin who ended up with a serious case of COVID and now can't walk up a flight of stairs without being winded. And she's now trying to warn her community, which has one of the lowest vaccination percentages in the state. And so, again, we just keep pleading and asking people. We know why the cases are going up. We know why hospitalizations are going up, and it's just because we need more people to get vaccinated. And I promise you, the disease is worse than the vaccine. I can't make it more clear than that. The disease is far worse than the vaccine, and we desperately need you to get vaccinated. So we will report today more than 241 people in the hospital with COVID. 1 month ago, there were 161 people in the hospital with COVID. So those are numbers that we know we can change, and we have the answer there. And with that, I think that's probably plenty. I want to make sure, since we have so many of you, that we leave more time for questions. So,
Governor, with the idea of drought continuing on in 98% of the state in these conditions, are you contemplating further restrictions?
So again, those restrictions, as they occur, will always happen at the local water district level, and so we're trending right where we thought we would trend. These latest rainstorms are great, and will kind of take the edge off of that. What we're really worried about is what happens next year. Again, we have enough water from a culinary perspective to get through this year. We're fine. Now there are some jurisdictions. We saw this, I think, Hyde Park a couple of weeks ago, where they have a single system. So people watering their lawns, it's the same system as their drinking water. And what you will see sometimes is their wells are not keeping up with the demand. And so they had to go into some fairly severe restrictions to make sure that they had drinking water available. But we do have enough storage capacity in the state to get through this year. If we have another year like this one, that's where things get especially dicey. And so we are contemplating, Ben, longer term changes and restrictions. And that's where we're working with the legislature. I've talked about some of those, what we're doing with unnecessary grass that doesn't get used for anything other than just purely visual, park strips in communities, looking at requirements in HOAs, all kinds of requirements to both cut back on the amount of new lawn that is going in, and then incentivizing changes for existing businesses and homes to cut down, and of course with agriculture as well.
What kind of things are you looking at with agriculture?
So we've been talking with our agriculture folks, looking at incentivizing some of the changes that have already started. I mean, there's been a long and steady progress towards utilizing better forms of technology to water crops that take less water. And the ag community has been very good. They've been at the table with us from the beginning. They're looking at finding new ways to improve agriculture output with with less water, and so we're hoping to get some money to incentivize that as well. I will tell you, from a drought perspective, we're also working on funding for our farmers. This is something I think worth mentioning, that as dire as it is with with residential watering, it's far worse in our agriculture community. This has been well reported, but because we had a bad year last year in ag with COVID and the disruptions in supply chains, this year could put farmers out of business. And while there is federal funding available for drought relief, it is very cumbersome, and there's a lot of red tape. It often takes a year or two to get that funding, and farmers can't wait a year or two, and they can't feed their livestock. That's the biggest problem. It's feed for livestock, and so when you can't feed your livestock, you have to sell it off and get rid of it, and that means you're selling off calves, ewes, the younger stock, and then you don't have that stock for next year, so it puts you behind for multiple generations. The average age of a farmer now is over 60 in the state of Utah, which means many of these farmers will just say, I'm done, I'm out, and I'm going to sell my land, and that we lose open space, we lose food production. That's just not good. So we're hopeful. We're working with the federal delegation, having conversations right now to see if there are things that we can do to help with relief for farmers right now instead of a year or two from now.
Governor, there's been many cities and counties and municipalities who have implemented watering restrictions, such as on irrigation water. So, for example, the city of Lehigh has even gone as far as to implement a $1,000 fine for people who overwater their lawns. What are your thoughts on restrictions like this, and what do you see as being the best practices or best policies that cities and counties can implement?
So we're very supportive of those types of restrictions, and in fact, I think every water district in the state has some types of restrictions in place right now, and that's critical. I know we're doing that at our own home in Fairview on our own farm. So we encourage water districts. They know their situation better than anyone else, and they can make those decisions based on their storage capacity and their average usage. Enforcement's going to be key on that. We've seen Lehigh's doing that. Weber Water has a 3 strikes and you're out policy, where your irrigation water is actually shut off if you violate the watering hours or the days of the week that you're able to water, and so that's going to have to be part of this. Water pricing is always something that we're going to have to look at in the desert. We're rational human beings, and we make decisions based on lots of different factors, and so pricing is certainly one of those things, and a fine is one way to get people's attention for sure. And so I think water districts also talk with each other, and they're learning. I do have to give a shout out. I mean, we always kind of focus on the negative of this, but we have seen a reduction in usage in almost every water district in the state. So people really are taking this seriously. When you compare water usage this year versus past years on a per capita basis, people are reacting and making a difference. And those types of restrictions will encourage everyone to do it, not just the ones that are paying attention.
Governor, the consumer price index is up a reported 5.5% since last year. Gas prices in Utah way above the national average. Housing prices continue to soar. Is it time for you and the legislature to provide tax relief for Utah families? And if not, what should you be doing to ease financial burdens of people in Utah?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Brian. We're very concerned, and I've mentioned it in this forum or in other similar forums over the past couple months, how concerned we are with the potential for inflation. I mean, not the potential; it's here. It's well documented, as you mentioned, 5.5% inflation last month, and so I think it's something that everyone should be concerned about. There are lots of factors of this. I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but I had a conversation several weeks ago with the head of the Federal Reserve Bank from San Francisco, and we're part of that region, and asked specifically about inflation. And what the response I got was kind of a mixed bag. There's no question that inflation is happening. The question is whether it's short-term inflation or long-term inflation. So one thing we know is that coming out of pandemics, and we've seen this in other parts of the world, that there will always be a gap between consumer demand and production, which will lead to inflation. So as you come out of a pandemic, people get back to normal before supply chains get back to normal. So there's a good chance that we will always see inflation coming out of a pandemic. The question is, though, is this more than just that? And I think it is. I don't think you can just keep putting trillions of dollars of money into a system and not expect that there will be some type of inflation. That's economics 101. It's very, very simple. So I don't think you can just point to, hey, well, this is coming out of a pandemic. Although I will say this, the United States is far ahead of the rest of the world in vaccinations, and supply chains aren't just nationally based, they're global based. And so supply chains and production is still a struggle in other countries, which will lead to inflation as well. But I do think it's broader than that. I know there are a few categories that are really driving it right now. You mentioned housing being one, certainly here in the United States. In Utah, that's true. Gasoline prices also driving it. But inflation is the worst kind of tax on the poor. Inflation absolutely hits the poor harder than anyone else. They feel it as transportation costs go up, grocery prices go up, everything follows, right? And so, sorry, that's a long way to get to an answer to your question. The answer is yes. I think there is room for tax relief this coming session, and we haven't had those direct conversations yet. The legislature is taking some much-deserved time off, and not the legislature, but legislative staff is taking some much-deserved time off. They didn't get any time off last year because of the pandemic, and we had more special sessions than ever before last year. And so we will, coming back into August and September, we'll start to have those conversations, but I would be very supportive of tax relief based on inflation. I don't know. I have to see the numbers. We'll start to work through those and make some recommendations to the legislature, but I suspect that they will agree with me.
Do you have a preference? Do you have a philosophical preference in terms of where to cut taxes? You know,
I don't have strong philosophical preferences. I want to look at where inflation is hitting the hardest, what that looks like, and where we can help the most people. So those, I think those things matter. We do still have some tax on food. It's a reduced, it's a lower amount of tax. Again, that's one area where we're and that's mostly at the local level. The state tax obviously isn't there, but at the local level, that's one area where we could see a change. So and I hate to spitball because it's so early, but I want to make sure that whatever change we make impacts the most Utahns and those that are feeling the repercussions of inflation the most.
Governor, how harmful has some of the anti-vaccination rhetoric that we've been seeing primarily on right-wing media, Fox News, how harmful has that been to the efforts here in the state and overall to get people to take the vaccine?
So, Brian, it's a good question, and I don't have any hard data that would tell us that we've seen, based on some of these reports or whatever this propaganda that's coming out, that it's had a significant impact. I'd have to look. We are constantly surveying people to see if trends are changing. So I'd have to go back and look at and compare those numbers to see if we've seen any change from, say, January, where people were the numbers that said they would get it versus the numbers that say they will get it now.
How do you push back against this constant drumbeat?
Yeah, no, but let me finish. Whether I have the data or not, I think it's harmful. It's certainly not helpful, and it does concern me deeply. I agree with some who have said it's ridiculous. And here's the thing: I'm very proud of President Trump, and I've said this many times. I'm very proud of Operation Warp Speed. In fact, I've said that I think that years from now, decades from now, we'll look back on Operation Warp Speed as one of the greatest advancements of medicine in human history, and one of the best things to happen during this. And I think Republicans and the president should be taking credit for what happened. I'm grateful that President Trump got the vaccine. I mean, those are things that I think we should be saying. But I don't think we can take credit for getting the vaccine and then tell people that there's something wrong with the vaccine and shouldn't be getting it. That just doesn't make sense to me. I think it's ridiculous what's happening. I mean, we have these talking heads who have gotten the vaccine and are telling other people not to get the vaccine. That kind of stuff is it's ridiculous, it's dangerous, it's damaging, and it's killing people. I mean, it's literally killing their supporters, and that makes no sense to me.
Governor, is the state in discussion about what they will do if COVID-19 cases keep rising? And are there plans to help those who are vaccine hesitant?
Well, so the plans are to just continue to get people vaccinated. I mean, those are the plans. Again, that's the only answer. The vaccines work better than masks. Vaccines work better than social distancing. Vaccines just work, and they allow us to do all the other things that we want to do. And so, yes, we are absolutely continuing with our efforts, and this goes back, sorry, Brian, you asked this as well, that we're continuing to encourage and inform and help people get vaccines. We're working very closely with the medical community. I've said this before, but this is now, we've moved from kind of the mass vaccination phase to kind of the hand-to-hand combat where you have to have conversations with people. And those conversations might take a half hour. Those conversations may take a week or 2 weeks. But as primary care physicians, whom are trusted by, have helped families for years, can sit down and have these conversations. I've had doctors tell me it's amazing. Like they'll have people come in who say they will never get the vaccine, and 20 minutes later they're giving them the vaccine. And so it's slow going, but every one of those vaccinations is a potential life saved, and so we're going to continue to work, make it easier than ever to get them, and do everything we can to help people make that choice.
Is the state in discussion of what they will do if COVID-19 cases keep rising?
I mean, certainly we talk about this, but the discussion is, we know what to do, and that's to get more people vaccinated. That's the answer.
Are there any new strategies that you're considering to get more people vaccinated, or is it just continuing on that, encouraging doctors to have those conversations?
Yeah, no new strategies. I mean, we're always looking at all strategies. I mean, we've talked a lot in here and with each of you about the potential for incentives. We haven't made any additional progress there. I don't have anything more to report today on that. But I will say that I am optimistic. There's no real reason for the increase that we're seeing in vaccinations right now, except potentially the rise in cases, right? I think that there is still a group of people who are vaccine hesitant, they're not completely opposed to the vaccine. And a lot of them thought, well, as long as cases are going down and it's going away, then I'm fine. But now that cases are going up and we are seeing more hospitalizations, I think those people are saying, yeah, it's time to go and get this. Family members encouraging others to get it. So I'm more optimistic today than I was even 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Governor, the discussion around the solution to the Little Cottonwood Canyon, or whether that's the gondola or enhanced bus service, is starting to heat up. And you've said before that you're interested in leaning toward the gondola option. But as public comments have come in, has your position changed at all? Do you still favor the gondola over
Well,
buses?
I'm keeping a very open mind on this one because as I was able to go through the data that was delivered by the Department of Transportation, and by the way, interestingly, this was the first time I think that they've ever, and maybe that any Department of Transportation has actually released 2 preferred options instead of just one. And that made a lot of sense to me because they're very different options, but both showed tremendous support as well as an ability to fix the problem for a reduced amount of money. And so they're similar in that sense, but again, very different in the way that they deliver people from the bottom to the top of the mountain. And so I think both options are fantastic. There are pros and cons to both of them, and and so I'm keeping an open mind and just waiting for those comments to come in, and then I look forward to sitting down with local officials and state officials, legislature, and UDOT to help make that final decision.
Considering how expensive this will be, do you think ski resorts should have a significant skin in the game? Considering say the gondola would go straight to Alta or Snowbird. What are your thoughts on that, and are they doing enough?
Yeah, so I think the answer is yes. I think they should have skin in the game, but also I want to say they want to have skin in the game. They are very interested in conversations that I've had or that they've had with others that have been reported back to me, that the ski resorts in that canyon, they want to be part of the solution, and they recognize they will benefit from this. This is good for them. It's good for business, and so they're very excited about this. It's something they've been pushing for a long time, and they're certainly at the table, and they've said all along they're willing to participate. And what that participation ultimately looks like, I don't know. Those conversations will be had as we get closer to a final decision, but they're pretty excited about it, and so are we.
Is this too good for business, considering how many people are already getting up to those canyons, and the lift lines this past season were so long? I mean, getting more and more people up that canyon, how do you balance that? And is this too good for business?
Well, I'm not as worried about that piece. Again, we want to get people up that canyon in an environmentally safe manner, and they have their business models and their plans, but we'll continue to work closely with them. We want to make it easier for people to get up there and to enjoy the slopes. And waiting for 2 hours in your car, they're still getting up there, but they're not enjoying the ride.
Okay, that's all the time we have for our television broadcast. Join us back here next month for the Governor's Monthly News Conference, and thank you for joining us. All right, and we want to continue on with our online version. We're going to go to Chris Reed with St. George News. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Governor. And first off, as far as the COVID numbers, at least here in southern Utah, you look at the numbers right now, especially hospitalizations, and they're higher than they were at this time a year ago. If you can explain why, almost on the public's part, a lack of urgency about this. And you've mentioned about, obviously, the solution is vaccines. Are there any other solutions as far as especially as far as the hospitalizations are concerned?
Yeah, Chris, so thank you. You're right to point out that there are some regional differences in the state, and certainly we've seen in Washington County and Iron County, unfortunately, the vaccination rates have been a little lower in some of those areas, and that's leading to the higher hospitalization rates. And so, look, again, there just aren't any other options that are any better than vaccines. The lack of urgency, I think, is this feeling that this is gone and I don't have to worry about it. I think there is a growing sense of urgency as those hospitalizations are starting to tick up. What I'm hoping is that the outreach that will happen in those local areas, and certainly we're talking to our local health districts constantly to tell the stories, and that's what I'm trying to do today, is to instill a sense of urgency in people by hearing these real stories from real people who were like those that have decided not to get vaccinated in your neck of the woods and are now wishing they had. And we don't want people to have those types of regrets. And we'll continue to help encourage that sense of urgency, and hopefully we'll see an increase in that corner of the state.
On another matter, in Garfield County, if you may not be aware, but there is a case of a woman who's facing a year in prison for damaging Blue Lives Matter. She's being charged with a hate crime. Now, the changes under the law passed by the legislature a year ago or so. I guess, what would you say to those who question whether damaging a Blue Lives Matter sign is equatable to painting a swastika on a synagogue or damaging a Black Lives Matter sign?
Well, thank you. I'm not aware of that specific case, and so there was a lot of negotiation that went into that bill to get that bill passed. It was something that we supported, and certainly I dislike hate wherever it is or wherever it's pointed out, and I care deeply about our law enforcement community here in the state, and hope that we will continue to support law enforcement here in the state. We have an incredible, really high marks for law enforcement. Utah has always been near the top of the nation when it comes to support for our women and men in blue, and I'm certainly grateful. I'm now as governor, I have protection from members of our law enforcement community every day, and they're the best people I know. I love my security detail are seriously they're just the best, and I feel that way about the law enforcement folks that I get to work with. Now again, they're not all perfect, and we certainly have some examples of bad behavior, but they're few and far between here in our state, and we see some terrible. I did see yesterday. We had a terrible some markings in a parking lot in Logan, I think, that were despicably racist and using Nazi imagery and others. I don't, obviously that's worse, I think, but both are bad. This kind of having to choose. We tend to make this mistake in everything we do and say, like, you have to choose between one or the other. And you either have to be, pro cop or you have to be pro our multicultural communities, and you can't be both. And so, I don't think you should be destroying Blue Lives Matter signs. That's dumb and that's hate-filled, and don't do it. So whether one is worse than the other, I think that the racist behavior may be a little worse, but I don't know why we have to put it on a scale and always weigh those things. And so again, I apologize for not knowing the details of that particular case, but I just stop it. Just stop doing stupid stuff.
Governor, you're standing in front of an American flag and also the flag of the state of Utah. Yeah. Do you have thoughts about what Utah Black Lives Matter said about the American flag being a racist symbol?
Yeah, and I've said as much. Look, this flag is the greatest flag in the history of the world, and it represents the very best of our country, the very best of her people. It represents an ideal of union, an ideal that all men and women are created equal, and that we are endowed with these unalienable rights from our Creator, and that's what it stands for. I think our flag stands against racism. And I said I refuse to let white supremacists take away what that flag stands for, and I refuse to let Lex Scott take away what that flag stands for. And I thought what she said was despicable, and it was wrong, and she should have apologized, and she didn't, and that's her right. But I think she hurt her cause far more than she advanced her cause.
Governor, at this point, the legislature is starting to take a look at whether we need to add more bar licenses in Utah. Do you support it?
I do. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Because we're the fastest growing state in the nation, and so we should be adjusting based on population growth, and I want to make sure that that people who choose to drink have that opportunity. I also want to make sure that we're protecting, especially our young people, and that we're protecting every way we can against the abuses that come from binge drinking, and certainly I think we've done a decent job of that here in Utah, of trying to balance those things. But I've been supportive. I have to give a shout out to DABC and the incredible work that's going on there. We've tried to change that over the past 6 months. It's something that we've worked on as an administration with our new director, who's fantastic, and I think we're making a difference. And are noticing that, to help those who want to drink responsibly, and will continue to support well-reasoned and moderate improvements in our alcohol policy.
Okay, Lisa Riley Roche with Deseret News, go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Governor, I appreciate what you have to say about the impact of stories of people who chose not to get vaccinated and now regret it. But is there a need here in Utah for more of an appeal by leaders in the state? I mean, you're certainly very outspoken about the need for vaccination, but do we need to hear more from others? I'm thinking just across the board, the business community, churches, others, in a very vocal way. I mean, we've seen people say, yeah, it's probably a good idea to get vaccinated, but no one is saying you really have to do this if you want to protect yourself and your community. Is that what we need to hear at this point?
Well, I think we are hearing that. I think we've heard that across the board. We're very fortunate here in the state to have a real unified message. We've had the president. They've been very clear. Everyone, you absolutely need to get vaccinated. If you want to protect yourself and your family, get vaccinated. Get vaccinated. I've been trying to carry that flag. We've had chambers of commerce that have been incredible. Specifically, the Salt Lake Chamber, who has gone above and beyond in working to get that message out, and not just get that message out, but to actually get people vaccinated. And so we've been working with the chambers to get vaccine clinics in business parking lots to help with their employees, to help them do that. We've had wonderful relationships with churches and religious leaders across the state who are encouraging and pleading with their membership to get vaccinated. So I would never turn down additional help or stronger for but unlike many other states, we've seen a tremendously unifying message, and I think it's hard for people to kind of miss that message. Or I mean, certainly people can disagree with it or can avoid it, but they can't say they haven't heard it or that the message wasn't one of at least strong encouragement.
Okay, we do have a question from Sean Hammersmeyer from The Spectrum, and he asks, it's estimated that over half of all renters and a quarter of homeowners in St. George are cost burdened. Is there any action that you or the legislature will take to improve affordable housing options in Utah? So
we've taken several steps, and it's important to note that we take those steps and they don't happen immediately. It takes time to implement those steps. Many of these laws didn't go into effect until May. If they were steps that needed funding, that doesn't start until July 1st. So just, literally just a couple weeks ago. And so those measures are being implemented right now. The state set aside tens of millions of dollars for projects around affordable housing. There were changes made around accessory dwellings to allow for accessory dwellings, which will immediately create additional capacity and hopefully help to reduce those demands. Building is the question came from. Building is going on at an ever increasing rate, which I must say, right? We have a water issue too, and so we're constantly looking at that. How many houses we're building? What does conservation look like? Because water is the one thing that could increase the cost of housing exponentially more if we're not able to build and create new housing options. But this is something that we're all worried about. We don't want to become California. We're all concerned about it, and we are constantly getting new ideas from the private sector, from the nonprofit sector, and I suspect that there will be another suite of bills that comes before the legislature this next year as we're working with them that will further help to increase housing stock and decrease price.
Jacob with KSL.com, go ahead with your question.
can't hear you. You're muted if we're having a technology issue.
Do we have any questions out here?
Yeah.
Still not hearing you, so we'll go to...
The Great Salt Lake is potentially days, weeks away from hitting a historic low. Should more be done to protect it, and what can you do? Because water that goes into it is considered technically no beneficial use.
Yeah, so actually, unfortunately, Ben, I think we did hit the low last week. So we have hit the historic low, recorded low. Representative on potential solutions for to help with the ecosystem there, and to make sure that we're continuing to get water flows where they need to be. We have our best experts that are working on this. You're right, obviously, with that once water enters in there. I mean, there are important things that happen with that water, just not for that at all. But we need to make sure that the flows that are going into the Great Salt Lake continue to maintain it. And I think it's also important to point out that while we don't drink that water out of that lake, that the lake effect that happens because that lake exists gives us more snow in the mountains, which in turn goes into our reservoirs and our streams and gives us that drinking water. And so without that lake effect, not only would we not get as much precipitation as we normally get in this distribution channel, but we would also have tremendous dust problems potentially as salt and those fine silts get into the air. And so we desperately want to avoid 20 or 30 years from now some sort of ecological disaster, and that's why we're taking proactive steps right now. That's why we have to be careful as we remove water. So, for example, one of the things we can do to increase water capacity in the state is to reuse water, right? And so to use water twice. So you use it for for one purpose, and then you use it to water your lawns or whatever. But as you do that, now you're taking water that would normally go into the Jordan River and flow into the Great Salt Lake out of the stream, and that could further exacerbate that problem. So when it's like a balloon, when you push on one side, it goes out the other side. We're looking holistically at all of these measures, because anything you do on one hand could impact the other hand. And fortunately, there are people a lot smarter than me that are working on it.
Okay, and I'm hearing we have Jacob now. So go ahead, Jacob.
Good morning, Governor. Can you hear me now?
I can, Jacob, yes.
Great. Yeah, I wanted to ask about kids getting vaccinated and where that stands here in Utah. I think last we heard it was around 26% vaccinated for that 12 to 15 age group. But obviously with school coming up, and then obviously there's been some recent outbreaks at summer camps. Where does that stand with kids getting vaccinated, and how are we working to get more kids vaccinated?
Yeah, thank you, Jacob. So the latest number I have is now, so we significant increase from the talked about it. I should probably be more accurate, especially after this past week. 29.8% is the actual number that I have here. So that's 63,000. And by the way, that's just ages 12 to 15. So it's even higher, 16 to 18. So if we're looking, 12 to 18, I don't have that in front of me, but I know it's higher than that 30%, which is again good news. Across the nation, the younger you are, the lower the vaccination rates. So again, we're at like 90% for those over the age of 65, and but we're just at 30% with at least one dose from 12 to 16. So what are we doing? So we're working with again with our primary care physicians, and we're working with schools to make sure that we have vaccine clinics available for those families that want it. We think and we suspect that as we get closer to school, we'll see more kids. You'll remember that approval for those vaccinations from that age group happened right at the end of the school year, as we were heading into summer, and so a lot of people just didn't feel the need because they weren't in school, just at different circumstances, and so we're hopeful. Again, it is important to point out that the the hospitalization rates, the serious illness rates, the death rates are significantly lower amongst this population. The problem, though, of course, as we've seen, and in some of those cases that I mentioned, what happened was kids got it, brought it home, mom and dad weren't vaccinated, mom or dad are in the hospital or have unfortunately passed away. That's really what we need to avoid. And so getting younger people vaccinated will help slow the circulation of the disease amongst our older population. And of course, that doesn't mean you're out of the woods. We do have some cases of young people who have been hospitalized, and even a couple who have lost their lives, unfortunately. And so we'll continue to encourage and make available those vaccines for a younger population, and be hopeful that we can slow the spread. Again, fortunately, we took measures to get teachers vaccinated first, and so a very large percentage of our teachers have been vaccinated. But I would encourage any teachers who have not been vaccinated to get vaccinated before heading back to school.
Governor, you mentioned a moment ago, quote, we don't want to become California. And yet there seem to be a myriad of issues that may be coming to a head in the state of Utah: congestion, air quality, water, growth, etc. Is Utah, do you believe, a victim of this?
Well, certainly success breeds success, and a new host. And California is a really popular statement. It's great, and I agree with it wholeheartedly.
99% approval rating from your constituents.
That's right. But there are a lot of Californians that want California to be more like Utah, and so they're coming to Utah. And we're glad you're here. I tell them all the time, just whatever you do, don't turn us into where you left. Remember why we are the way we are. So there are things we can do. I would love to build a wall around Utah and just keep it the way it is, but we know that's not how it works. And so what we have to do, though, is to continue to invest, and we have to continue to invest in infrastructure. That's why these projects, like we're talking about up the canyon, are so important. Growth is not, and density is not a terrible thing. It can be a terrible thing, but it's only a terrible thing if you don't put the infrastructure in place. And so we're trying to be thoughtful and strategic about it. We have strategic partnerships amongst the communities along the Wasatch Front. It used to be, Lehigh was its own thing, right? And American Fork was its own thing, and South Jordan and West Jordan and Harriman were their own things, but now they've all grown together, and so a decision by one entity impacts the other, and so we have to start thinking more regionally in our planning. We have to be careful if you build, if you approve a huge density project on the west side of the valley, and we don't have the east-west corridors in place to handle that. Now you've decreased the quality of life for everyone that lives east of there, right? And those are the types of things we're trying to avoid. We've got some wonderful, again, regional plans that are out there. Wasatch Choice 2050 is one that I recommend. They're doing great work looking at planning transportation corridors and things we're doing, again, working with UDOT. We worked, I appreciate the legislature giving us funding for UTA, giving UTA funding, not a state agency, but to double track portions of Front Runner. That's going to alleviate congestion, right? And you put density in areas where you have those hubs, so that people can just ride tracks and can ride Front Runner and don't have to get in a car. As we look at growth coming to the point of the mountain, right? That new land there once the prison moves, looking at making that development. How do we put the transportation options there so that we can reduce that congestion? Our air quality, despite being the fastest growing state in the nation, has improved significantly over the past 10 years. A 40% reduction, even though we've added 40% more people. That's remarkable. Those are the types of things that we can do to prevent growth from being harmful or reducing the quality of life. But the other thing, Brian, is that we can, the way we incentivize businesses to come here, we're looking at that too. When you have 2.8% unemployment and you're busting at the seams, you don't have to give an incentive for every job to come here. At that point, we focus more on workforce development, and we focus inward on companies that are already here that will give back and build the community. We don't have to bring another job here to compete against the jobs that are already here and have to bring more people in to fill those jobs because there's nobody to fill them.
So you would like to pull back on some of these incentives?
I would, yeah, and I've said that publicly for a long time. That's part. We have a brand new. We actually, and I know this hasn't got. It's been written about a little bit, but kind of under the radar. We are now implementing the greatest change in the way we do economic development at the state level since at least 2004. In that we have this new commission. It's much more holistic. It's made up of representatives of higher education. It's made up of representatives of local government. I sit on it, as does the president and the speaker, and we will be making recommendations. We have, again, our experts that are working on this. There was a big piece of legislation. One of the biggest bills this year that was passed was around, we changed the Governor's Office of Economic Development to the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, focusing on lifting everyone in the state, opportunity available for a bigger focus on rural Utah, a bigger focus on our low-income and multicultural communities. This is a huge change, and it's about being part of it is about pulling back on incentives, giving bigger incentives to those industries that really have a halo effect that help everyone, and higher paying jobs, and then lowering incentives, having a dial based on unemployment. So when we have low unemployment, we dial that back. Bigger incentives for places like rural Utah. Like, we're not going to give you an incentive to come here where there's you don't have any employees and we're packed. But if you want to go somewhere else where the unemployment is still high and they desperately need you, then we will give you a big incentive. So being, I've called it a maturation of economic development, kind of economic development 2.0, where we're smarter about it, we're more surgical about it, and we're doing the things that benefit Utahns in the right way.
But on that note, you were in Monroe recently meeting with people down there, and those areas have not seen the growth that the Wasatch Front has seen. So what are you doing about that? You signed some bills to incentivize companies to move to rural Utah, but are you seeing that, or is the Wasatch Front more desirable?
Well, obviously, the Wasatch Front is going to be more desirable for lots of different reasons, right? It depends on what your industry is. So if you need to be close to a major airport, then Monroe is going to be a tough sell for you, right? That's going to be difficult. But again, this is part of being more strategic. We are seeing growth, by the way, across rural Utah. And I have to point this out. So we talk a lot about the price of housing along the Wasatch Front. This is, for the first time, this is a statewide phenomenon. This is happening everywhere. Several months ago, I was talking to one of the county commissioners in Sevier County, Monroe was, and they had like 25 houses for sale in the whole county, and that's just gotten worse. I mean, this is everywhere, and part of that, part of this is good news, Ben, in that you can now live lots of places. You don't have to move your company there, but you can move your employees there. And we've done this as a state. It was really cool. I had just this week, I've had several conversations with people who have taken the state up on working remotely and moved back home where they grew up. We have an attorney for the state and then he actually, this happened a couple of years ago, but he was able to move back to Panguitch. He's got 7 kids who are in the school system there, which is a big deal in Panguitch. language because those schools were drying up. They didn't have enough kids. They were really struggling. His wife coaches basketball there. He's on the city council. This is, you know, they're serving. That's a story. We have people in public safety who have been able to move back to Iron County. So that's making a difference. But we are seeing some light manufacturing that has moved into Price, replacing some jobs that have been lost in the coal industry. They're finding out that we have good transportation, we have great workers, we have technology that's available. We've done a really good job of getting broadband out to most of rural Utah, not all of rural Utah. And so it's not for everyone. Don't get me wrong. We're not going to get Adobe to open an office in Fairview. It's just not going to happen, right? I get that. But we may have some Adobe employees who can work from Fairview 3 or 4 days a week, and then we can get some of these other businesses to move to these hubs. I really am focusing on the hubs because if you have growth in Roosevelt, and you have growth in Price, and you have growth in Cedar City, and you have growth in Ridgefield, and you have growth in Ephraim, in those hubs, the other surrounding communities will benefit from that because people can live in Spring City and drive to Ephraim, right? People can drive to Roosevelt. People can, but those hubs are places now. They're growing where they have hotels, they have restaurants, the types of things that some of these smaller businesses want, and it's too expensive to build or grow or expand on the Wasatch Front.
Governor, a new report suggests you need to earn at least $20.21 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment here in Utah. But this study shows wages aren't keeping up with the cost of living. What changes do you think need to happen to aid in this effort?
Well, that's right. I mean, we know that inflation, as was mentioned earlier, when you have 5.5% inflation growth last month, I'm pretty sure we didn't have 5.5% wage growth in a month. That's one of the evils of inflation. But there are inflationary increases in wages. I talk to employers all the time who are struggling to find enough employees. Again, we have more jobs available right now in Utah than maybe ever before, and what that does, that competition increases wages. I hear employers all the time saying, "Yep, I'm increasing my wages so that we can attract a workforce." Now that's good for workers, and so we will continue to see those increases happen, and we'll continue to work. But what I'm most worried about are that we have thousands of jobs available, high-paying jobs, great jobs, making much more than $20 an hour, making $30, $40, $50 an hour, and we have people that are earning $7 an hour, $10 an hour, making those connections. How do we get them into those $30 an hour jobs? And so what you're going to hear from us, and our team is working on this, is an additional workforce development piece. What can we do to make it easier, cheaper, quicker for people to upskill and to get these better jobs that are available? That's what I want to do. I think instead of paying $30 an hour to work at McDonald's, I think we should help the McDonald's worker get a $30 an hour job. And that's where my focus is, and that's the change I want to make.
Well, what happens to the people that there has to be someone to work in that McDonald's? How do they afford housing?
Yeah, my kid works at McDonald's. That's what happens.
Okay, thank you, Governor. Yep. We are out of time. We appreciate you answering all of our questions and taking a full hour with us.
Thank you so much, you guys. Have a great week and stay safe out there.
Thank you.